My son didn't pick me up from the hospital. So I rented a car and drove myself home. The key wouldn't turn. I stood on my own porch in the rain. My son's voice came through the door. He said the new locks meant I didn't live there anymore. I let the key fall. It hit the wet step and stayed there. I didn't pick it up. I just stood until the cold told me the truth. Then I drove away. And I changed everything. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. I left the hospital alone. The bracelet bit my wrist. White plastic with my name misspelled. They'd written Marian instead of Miriam. Even there, I was becoming someone else. The discharge papers sat folded in my coat pocket. Instructions for wound care, prescriptions, a phone number for rides home. I didn't call it. Ethan had promised to come. He'd stood by my bed the morning before surgery. He'd told me he would be there. I waited 2 hours in the lobby. I watched families arrive. Wheelchairs rolling. Flowers in crinkled paper. Voices soft with relief. I called his cell 3 times. It rang and rang. No answer. No text. No son. He didn't forget. He chose not to come. So I walked to the rental counter. The woman behind the desk had tired eyes. She asked if I needed help with my bag. I told her I could manage. The car smelled like fake pine and old cigarettes. The seat was pushed too far back. My hands shook when I adjusted the mirror. I hadn't driven in weeks. The stitches pulled when I turned the wheel. I drove slow. The coast road stretched gray and bare. Maples stood like bones against November sky. Rain started just past the bridge. Soft at first, then steady. I thought about calling Ethan again. I didn't. I thought about what I would say when I got home. How I would ask why. But I already knew why. Kayla didn't want me there. Ethan didn't want the fight. So I became the easier problem to solve. The one you solve by forgetting. Gray Harbor appeared through the rain. The library. The post office. The diner I used to own. Someone had painted the sign. It wasn't mine anymore. I turned onto Birch Street. My house sat forth from the corner. White trim. Blue shutters. Hydrangeas I'd planted before Ethan was born. The porch light was on. I parked in the driveway. Got out slow. The rain soaked through my coat. I climbed the 3 steps. My keys were in my hand. The old brass key I'd carried for 30 years. I slid it into the lock. It wouldn't turn. I tried again. Pushed harder. The key jammed halfway. Wrong lock. New lock. I stood there. Rain dripping from my hair. Then I heard him. Ethan's voice. Through the door. Not loud. Not angry. Just clear. He said the new locks meant I didn't live there anymore. I didn't knock. I didn't call his name. I opened my hand. Let the key fall. It hit the wet step. Bounced once. Stayed there. I didn't pick it up. I just stood. Rain running down my face. The cold reached through my coat. Through my skin. The cold told me what Ethan wouldn't say. This was intentional. This was final. Then I got back in the car. I didn't cry. Not then. I drove to the Anchor Motel on Route 7. The sign blinked yellow through the rain. The clerk was a kid with headphones around his neck. He took my cash. Didn't ask questions. Room 9 smelled like bleach and dust. I sat on the bed. The springs groaned. The heater rattled on. It sounded like breathing. I peeled off my wet coat. Hung it on the chair. My side ached. The stitches pulled when I bent. I'd had a tumor removed. Small. Contained. They'd said I was lucky. Lucky. I sat there and felt the truth settle. My son had locked me out. My son had chosen silence over opening a door. I'd raised him in that house. Fed him, bandaged him, taught him how to apologize when he broke something. He'd forgotten that last part. Or maybe he'd just decided some things weren't worth fixing. I thought about Robert, my husband, dead 6 years now. He'd been a park ranger. Careful, steady. He used to say storms don't announce themselves. They just arrive. He'd made me promise things before he died. Keep the deed in your name. Keep the papers safe. Don't assume people stay the same. I thought he was being paranoid. He wasn't. I pulled the folder from my bag. The one I'd kept in the safe deposit box. Robert had left an amendment to the will. Notarized. Witnessed. It gave me full control. Full authority to change everything if I faced neglect. He'd written it 5 years before he got sick. He'd known. Somehow he'd known. I read it twice. The words didn't change. I could take it all back. The house. The rental property next door. The savings. I could redirect it. All of it. The rain hammered the window. I made a list on the motel notepad. My handwriting looked strange. Shaky. Call Nora Patel. Retrieve the camera footage. Document everything. I'd been recording. For months, I'd worn a button camera. A tiny thing pinned to my cardigan. I'd recorded Kayla's parties, her comments, her performances, the Halloween party where she'd dressed as me. Gray wig, hunched shoulders, mocking voice. Everyone had laughed. Ethan had filmed it. I had evidence. Months of it. I folded the list, tucked it under my pillow. The heater kept rattling. I lay back, stared at the ceiling. Water stained and cracked. I wasn't hungry. I wasn't tired. I was awake. For the first time in years, I was awake. I thought about the diner I used to run. Hale's Diner. I'd opened at 5 every morning. Made coffee. Cracked eggs. Listened to fishermen complain about weather and wives. I'd known how to feed people. How to make them feel seen. I'd been good at that. Then Robert died. Then I sold the diner. Then I moved in with Ethan. I thought I was helping. Thought I was staying close. I was wrong. Kayla had turned me into decor. Something quaint. Something to photograph and pity. Ethan had let her. No. Ethan had helped her. I closed my eyes. Tomorrow I would call Nora. Tomorrow I would pull every file. Every video. Every record. Tomorrow I would stop being the woman locked outside her own life. The rain slowed. The room grew quiet. I slept with my coat within reach. Just in case I needed to leave fast. Just in case I needed to remember I could. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. Morning came gray through thin curtains. I woke with my coat still draped over the chair. My side ached. The stitches pulled when I sat up. I dressed slow. Same clothes from yesterday. The motel coffee tasted like rust and regret. But it was hot. And it was mine. I sat at the small table. Opened my notebook. The list from last night stared back at me. Call Nora. Get the footage. Document everything. I started with the past. Before I was Ethan's mother, I was Miriam Hale. I ran a diner on Route 7 for 23 years. My hands knew batter by weight. My voice could fill a room. Saturday mornings smelled like bacon and burnt sugar. Regulars sat in the same seats. Ordered the same meals. I remembered their names. Their troubles. Their children's birthdays. I was good at that kind of love. Robert was a park ranger. Steady. Quiet. He came home smelling like spruce and wood smoke. He talked about storms. How they build slow but hit hard. He made me promise things I didn't understand then. Keep the deed in your name. Keep papers safe. Trust your instincts. He said people change, not always for the better. I thought he was being careful. He was being right. When he got sick, he made a file. Legal papers. Notarized. Witnessed. An amendment to the will. It gave me full control if I ever faced neglect or abandonment. He signed it 5 years before the cancer came. He'd known something I hadn't. After Robert died, I closed the diner. Sold it to a couple from Portland. They painted over my sign. I moved closer to Ethan. Thought it would be easier. Thought we'd be a family again. Kayla had other plans. She curated rooms like magazines. Everything staged. Everything perfect. I became part of the aesthetic. The sweet old mother-in-law. She took photos of me knitting. Posted them with soft filters. Her followers loved it. I hated it. Then things shifted. Food labels appeared. Household only. Do not touch. Cabinets started locking. Drawers too. Guests came over. They smiled at me like I was furniture. Kayla introduced me as the previous generation. Said it with a laugh. Ethan stood beside her. Said nothing. Silence is agreement when it matters. I started keeping track. I bought a small camera. Button-sized. Pinned it to my cardigan. I recorded conversations. Parties. The everyday cruelties. Robert had taught me to document. To trust evidence over memory. So I did. The Halloween party was the worst. Kayla wore my old gray cardigan. Put on a wig. She hunched her shoulders. Shuffled across the room. Her voice went high and shaky. A cruel imitation. She told everyone I repeated stories. That I forgot things constantly. That I was stubborn. Difficult. A burden they carried with grace. The guests laughed. Someone called it brilliant. Ethan filmed the whole thing. Steady hands. No hesitation. I watched from the hallway. Camera recording. No one saw me. Or maybe they did and didn't care. I saved the footage. Backed it up twice. Gave a copy to Agnes Boyd. My neighbor. Agnes was the only one who still knocked with soup. She told me winter teaches you to prepare or be humbled. I wrote her a note. If anything happens, this is why. She pressed my hand. Didn't ask questions. Now I sat in the motel with Rust coffee and a plan. I pulled out my phone. Dialed Nora Patel's number. She answered on the second ring. Her voice was warm. Professional. I told her I needed help. Legal help. She asked if I was safe. I said yes. She asked if I could come to her office. I said yes. We set a time. 10 o'clock. I hung up. Finished the coffee. My hands weren't shaking anymore. I packed my bag. Checked the room twice. Left the key on the desk. The drive to Nora's office took 20 minutes. Her building sat near the courthouse. Red brick. White trim. I'd paid her in pie once. Back when she was a broke law student. She'd worked at the diner. Studied between shifts. I fed her. She remembered. The waiting room smelled like lemon polish and old paper. Nora came out to meet me. She looked older. Sharper. Her handshake was firm. She led me to her office. Closed the door. Told me to start from the beginning. So I did. I told her about Robert's amendment. About the locked cabinets. The labels. The performances. I showed her the footage. We watched Kayla mock me in my own cardigan. Watched Ethan film it without flinching. Nora's jaw tightened. She didn't interrupt. When the video ended, she leaned back. She asked if I had more. I said yes. She asked if I had hospital records. Discharge papers. I said yes. She asked if anyone else witnessed this. I told her about Agnes. Nora made notes. Fast. Precise. She talked about protective orders, property transfers, legal channels. She used words like neglect, abandonment, elder abuse. I didn't cry. I nodded. She said this would take time. Weeks. Maybe months. She said we needed affidavits, witnesses, documentation. She said we'd need to go to court. I told her I was ready. She looked at me, really looked. She said I was braver than I knew. I told her I was just tired of being erased. We spent 2 hours building the case. She made copies, filed papers, contacted Agnes. By the time I left, the sky had cleared. The sun felt strange on my face. I drove back to the motel. Bought groceries from the corner store. Bread, cheese, apples, tea. I wasn't going back to that house. Not until it was mine again. Or not at all. That night I sat on the motel bed, ate cheese and bread, drank tea from a paper cup. I thought about Robert, about the diner, about all the years feeding strangers. I'd known how to take care of people. Now I had to learn how to take care of myself. The heater rattled, the light buzzed. Outside, cars passed on the wet road. I opened my notebook, started a new page, wrote the date, wrote the plan. Step 1: reclaim my name. Step 2: reclaim my home. Step 3: build something that lasts. I underlined the last one twice. Then I turned off the light. Sleep came easier than I expected. Maybe because I finally had a direction. Maybe because fighting back feels better than disappearing. I dreamed of the diner. Of coffee brewing. Of voices layered like music. Of hands that knew their work. When I woke, I wasn't afraid anymore. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. 3 days passed in the motel. I learned the rhythm of temporary living. Coffee from the lobby at 6. Stale but hot. Checkout time ignored because I paid cash in advance. The clerk stopped asking questions. I spent mornings reviewing footage on my laptop. Frame by frame. Date by date. Kayla hosting parties I wasn't invited to. Ethan laughing at jokes made at my expense. Guests asking where I was. Kayla saying I preferred to stay upstairs. A lie. I'd been upstairs because the locks kept me there. I documented everything. Made spreadsheets. Printed screenshots. Nora said evidence needed organization. So I organized. Each video labeled. Each date noted. Each cruelty catalogued. It felt like accounting. Cold. Necessary. One clip stood out. Thanksgiving. 2 years ago. Kayla had hosted 20 people. Rented extra chairs. She'd made a seating chart. Professional. Color-coded. My name wasn't on it. I'd eaten in the kitchen. Paper plate. Folding chair. The camera caught her walking past. Telling someone I preferred it that way. Preferred isolation. Preferred silence. I hadn't preferred anything. I'd just learned to disappear. I saved the file twice. Backed it up 3 times. On the 4th day, I drove to Agnes Boyd's house. She lived 2 doors down from what used to be mine. Her porch had a swing. It creaked like a settling house. She opened the door before I knocked. She'd been watching for me. Inside smelled like cinnamon and old wood. She poured tea without asking. We sat at her kitchen table. The one with the wobbly leg. I told her what I was doing. The lawyer. The case. The plan. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she reached across and held my hand. She said she'd testify. She'd seen everything. The night I stood in the rain. The locked door. The dark house. She'd almost come outside. Almost called the police. But she'd waited. Watching. Unsure. She regretted that now. I told her regret wasn't useful. Action was. She squeezed my hand, said I sounded like Robert. I took that as the compliment it was. Agnes had kept notes too. Dates, times, observations. She showed me her journal. Neat handwriting, blue ink, entries going back 18 months. Miriam's car moved to the street, not the driveway. Miriam not at the mailbox anymore. Kayla collecting it instead. Miriam's curtains closed during the day. Used to stay open. She'd been documenting my erasure without me knowing. I felt something crack inside. Not breaking. Opening. Someone had seen. Someone had cared enough to write it down. We spent 2 hours matching her notes to my footage. Building a timeline. Cross-referencing. Confirming. When we finished, the case felt solid. Not just my word. Not just my videos. A neighbor's witness. An outsider's eyes. Before I left, Agnes walked me to the door. She said winter had taught her something. That preparing isn't paranoia. It's survival. That documenting isn't pettiness. It's protection. I told her she should have been a ranger like Robert. She laughed. Said she'd just been a woman paying attention. I drove back to the motel as the sun dropped low. The sky went pink. Then purple. Then nothing. That night I pulled Robert's file from my bag. The amendment he'd written. The one I'd kept hidden. I read it again. Slowly this time. He'd given me full authority to redirect everything. House. Rental property. Savings. Land near Mill Brook. All mine to control if I faced neglect or abandonment. His signature at the bottom. Dated. Witnessed. Notarized. He'd signed it on a Tuesday. September morning. 7 years ago. Before the cancer. Before the decline. Before the end. He'd known something would happen. Maybe not this exactly. But something. He'd loved me enough to protect future me from present uncertainty. I pressed my fingers to his signature. The paper was thin. Soft from years in the deposit box. I whispered thank you to the empty room. Then I made a new list. Not what I'd lost. What I'd build. The house wouldn't stay mine. I knew that already. Even if I won. Even if I got it back. I didn't want it anymore. It held too many ghosts. Too many locked doors. But I could use it. Transform it. Turn rejection into refuge. I wrote Harbor Women's Restorative Trust. An organization I'd researched online. Small. Underfunded. Waiting list long. They sheltered women leaving bad situations. Gave them time. Space. Skills. They had more need than buildings. I could change that. The house could hold 6 women. Maybe 8. The rental next door could hold 4 more. The land near Mill Brook could become gardens. Quiet space. A place to breathe after years of holding breath. I wrote the plan in detail. Legal transfer. Clear terms. Endowment structure. I'd keep one room. Small. At the back. Where hydrangeas used to grow blue in summer. The rest would belong to women who needed keys that worked. I fell asleep with the notebook open on my chest. Morning came with knocking. Firm. Steady. Official. I opened the door to a man in a gray suit. Process server. He handed me an envelope. Ethan and Kayla had filed a counterclaim. They said I'd abandoned the property. That I'd moved out voluntarily. That the house was theirs now. Legal transfer in progress. I read it twice. Felt my jaw tighten. They were trying to erase me legally. Make my locked out night into my choice. Turn victim into volunteer. I called Nora. She answered immediately. I read her the filing. She swore under her breath. Then she told me not to worry. We had evidence. They had lies. Lies don't hold up when cameras are watching. She said she'd file our response today. That we'd go to court within 2 weeks. That I should prepare to speak. To testify. To be seen. I told her I was ready. I'd spent years being invisible. Being quiet. Being convenient. I was done with that. That afternoon I drove to the bank. Retrieved Robert's file. Made 3 copies. Gave one to Nora. One to Agnes. Kept one with me. Then I drove to the house. My old house. Parked across the street. Engine off. Watched the windows. The door. The porch where I'd stood in rain. Ethan's truck sat in the driveway. Kayla's car beside it. They were home. They were comfortable. They thought they'd won. I didn't get out. Didn't knock. Didn't rage. I just sat. Watched. Let them think I was gone. Let them think silence meant surrender. The porch light came on. Warm. Yellow. My light. My electricity bill. My house. Not for long. I started the engine. Drove away. Back to the motel. Back to the stale coffee. Back to the plan. I had 2 weeks until court. 2 weeks to prepare. 2 weeks to decide who I'd be after the gavel fell. I knew one thing for certain. I wouldn't be the woman who stood in the rain. I'd be the woman who walked away from it. And built something fireproof in her wake. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. Snow came on the 10th day. Quiet at first. Then steady. I watched it from the motel window. White covering gray. It felt like the world was starting over. I wished I could do the same. But starting over meant going through first. Through the depositions. Through the courthouse. Through the telling. Nora called that morning. Court date set. December 19th. 2 weeks away. I marked it on the motel calendar. Red pen. Heavy circle. She said we'd meet 3 times before then. Prepare my testimony. Practice the hard questions. Review the evidence again. I told her I was ready. She said being ready and feeling ready were different things. I told her I'd spent 67 years feeling things. This time I just needed to be ready. She laughed. Said I'd make a good witness. The snow kept falling. I drove to the bank in 4 inches of fresh powder. The roads were quiet. Careful. Inside, the vault smelled like cold metal and old promises. I opened box 214 for the last time. Robert's letter sat on top. His handwriting still steady after 7 years. Miriam, it started. If you're reading this, something has gone wrong. I read it standing up. The vault guard waited by the door. Robert had written it the week after his diagnosis. Before chemo. Before the weight loss. Before hope ran out. He'd known he wouldn't be there to protect me. So he'd built protection into paper. The amendment. The instructions. The clear legal language. He'd thought of everything. Except how lonely it would feel to use it without him. I folded the letter. Put it in my coat pocket. Closed the box. Turned in the key. Some things you only need once. From the bank, I drove to Agnes's house. She'd made soup. Potato and leek. It smelled like the diner used to. Like home used to. We ate at her kitchen table. The same wobbly one. She asked if I was scared. I told her fear was expensive. I couldn't afford it anymore. She smiled. Said Robert would have said the same thing. After lunch, we walked through her backyard. Snow covered everything. The shed. The garden beds. The old bird bath. She pointed toward my old house through the trees. Told me she'd kept watching. Kept taking notes. Kayla had hired a contractor last week. Painting the trim. Ethan had changed the mailbox. New numbers. Shiny brass. They were erasing me. Making the house theirs. Agnes said it felt like watching a theft in slow motion. I told her that's exactly what it was. We walked back inside, shook snow from our coats. She made tea. I held the cup with both hands. The warmth felt like an apology I didn't know I needed. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the house. About the rooms I'd cleaned. The kitchen where I'd made Ethan's birthday cakes every year. Chocolate with vanilla frosting, his favorite. The porch where Robert and I used to sit summer evenings. Listening to cicadas. Watching fireflies. Not needing to talk. The bedroom where I'd folded his clothes after the funeral. Put them in boxes. Breathed in his smell one last time. That house held every version of me. Young wife. New mother. Widow. Grandmother who never got grandchildren. Now it held nothing of mine. Just new locks and fresh paint and people who wanted me gone. I got up. Made instant coffee in the motel microwave. Sat at the small table. Opened my laptop. I searched for Harbor Women's Restorative Trust. Their website was simple. A few photos. A mission statement. They helped women leaving abuse. Leaving homelessness. Leaving systems that failed them. They offered 6 months of housing. Job training. Legal help. Therapy. They had 12 beds. 73 women on the waiting list. I clicked through the photos. Women in a kitchen. Laughing. Chopping vegetables together. Women on a porch. Drinking coffee. Looking at something beyond the camera. Women who'd been erased. Now becoming visible again. I saw myself in every single face. I drafted an email to their director. Kept it simple. Professional. Said I had property to donate. Asked if we could meet. Hit send before I could second guess it. The reply came within an hour. Yes. Tomorrow. 10 o'clock at their office. I closed the laptop. Finished the coffee. Tomorrow I'd start building the after. Morning came with more snow. The roads were worse. I drove slowly. The trust's office sat above an insurance agency downtown. Narrow stairs. Faded carpet. A door with peeling paint. Inside smelled like old coffee and new hope. The director's name was Ruth Cannon. She had gray hair pulled back tight. Strong handshake. Direct eyes. She asked why I wanted to donate. I told her the short version. The locks. The erasure. The court case. She didn't interrupt. Didn't offer pity. When I finished, she leaned forward. She said she'd heard stories like mine too many times. Women whose families treat them like expired goods. Women who built the homes they're locked out of. Women who know hunger isn't just about food. She got it. All of it. I showed her the property details. The main house. 4 bedrooms. Full kitchen. Accessible bathroom. The rental next door. 2 bedrooms. Small but solid. The land near Mill Brook. 3 acres. Quiet. Private. Ruth's eyes widened. She did math in her head. She said they could house 10 women. Maybe 12. I told her that was the idea. She asked what I wanted in return. I told her 1 room. At the back of the main house. Where I could live. Where I could be useful again. Ruth studied me. Long and careful. Then she asked if I knew how to cook for groups. I almost laughed. Told her I'd run a diner for 23 years. She smiled. Said we had a deal. We spent 2 hours planning. Legal transfer after the court case. Clear deed. No strings. I'd keep my room. Help in the kitchen. Teach if women wanted to learn. Ruth would handle operations. Staffing. Intake. All the official pieces. We'd call it Winter Keys House. Because some doors only open when you're cold enough to fight for them. Before I left, Ruth hugged me. Firm. Genuine. The kind that means something. She said women like us don't disappear easy. We just get quieter until we're ready to be loud. I drove back through the snow. The roads were clearer. The sky was lifting. At the motel, I found an envelope under my door. Law firm return address. Norris office. Inside the deposition schedule. Witness list. Evidence summary. Everything we'd need for court. I spread it across the bed. Studied each page. Nora had listed me first. Then Agnes. Then the hospital social worker. The evidence filled 3 pages. Videos. Photos. Medical records. Financial documents. Text messages. Proof in triplicate that I hadn't left. I'd been pushed. That night I practiced my testimony. Spoke to the mirror. Kept my voice steady. Told the truth in simple sentences. No drama. No tears. Just facts. The calendar said December 12th. 7 days until court. 7 days until I either got my name back or lost it forever. I slept with the papers beside me. Evidence like a shield. Truth like a map. And somewhere under the snow, spring was already waiting. It just had to survive winter first. So did I. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. December 19th arrived cold and clear. I woke at 5. Couldn't sleep past that. The motel room felt smaller than usual. The walls closer. I showered. Dressed in navy. Not black. Black was for funerals. This wasn't a funeral. This was a resurrection. I skipped breakfast. My stomach wouldn't hold it. Drank water instead. Checked my bag 3 times. Papers. ID. Robert's amendment. The folder with evidence. Everything I needed to prove I existed. Nora had told me to arrive early. 9:30 for a 10 o'clock hearing. I left at 8:45 anyway. The courthouse sat downtown. Gray stone. Wide steps. It looked like every movie version of justice I'd ever seen. Except this was real. And I was the plaintiff. I parked 2 blocks away. Walked slow. My shoes clicked on the frozen sidewalk. Each step felt deliberate. Necessary. Inside, the courthouse smelled like floor wax and old wood. High ceilings. Echo when you breathed too loud. Security made me empty my bag. Wand over my coat. I passed through. Collected my things. Nora waited by the elevators. Sharp suit. Calm face. She asked if I was ready. I told her I'd been ready since the locks changed. She smiled. Said that was the energy we needed. We rode to the 3rd floor. The hallway was lined with benches. People waiting. Lawyers talking. Tension in the fluorescent light. Agnes sat near courtroom C. She wore her good coat. Stood when she saw me. Hugged me tight. She whispered that truth was louder than lies. I held on to that. The courtroom doors opened at 9:55. We filed in. Hard wooden benches. High windows letting in winter light. The judge's bench sat elevated. Empty still. I took my seat at the plaintiff's table. Nora beside me. Across the aisle, Ethan and Kayla sat with their attorney. A man in an expensive suit. Smooth hair. Confident posture. Ethan looked at me once. Then away. Kayla stared straight ahead, jaw tight. Neither of them looked sorry. The bailiff called us to rise. Judge Marian Kelso entered. A woman in her 60s. Gray hair. Sharp eyes. She settled behind the bench. Reviewed her notes. Then she looked up at us. She said this was a hearing on property rights and elder care. That she'd reviewed the filings. Seen the evidence. Read the depositions. That today we'd hear testimony. Examine facts. Seek clarity. Her voice was even, not warm, not cold, just clear. She called me first. I stood, walked to the witness stand. The bailiff held out a Bible, asked if I swore to tell the truth. I said I did. I'd never told anything else. Nora started with simple questions. My name, my age, my relationship to the defendants. I answered each one, voice steady. Then she asked about the house. I told her Robert and I bought it in 1982. That we'd raised Ethan there. That Robert died there. That I'd kept the deed in my name as he'd instructed. Nora asked why. I said Robert believed in preparation, in protecting what mattered. She asked what happened after I moved in with Ethan. I took a breath, told her about the labels on food, the locked cabinets, the parties where I became a prop, the Halloween performance, the hospital stay, the promised ride that never came, the key that didn't work, the voice through the door. I kept my voice level. Didn't cry, didn't perform, just told what happened, one fact after another. Nora played the Halloween video. The courtroom went silent. On screen, Kayla wore my cardigan. Hunched over, voice high and mocking. Guests laughed. Ethan filmed. I watched from my seat. Watched the judge watch. Her face didn't change, but her pen moved fast. Nora asked how that video made me feel. I said it made me feel erased. Like I'd become a joke in my own family. She asked if I'd abandoned the property voluntarily. I said no. I'd been locked out. That abandonment requires choice. I'd been given none. The defense attorney stood for cross-examination. He asked if I'd ever told Ethan I felt unwelcome. I said silence was permission in that house. So no. He asked if I had proof the locks were changed to exclude me. I said my key not working was proof enough. He asked if the Halloween party was meant as harm or humor. I looked at him directly. Said humor requires consent. I hadn't consented to being anyone's punchline. He paused, looked at his notes. Asked if I'd considered that my son was overwhelmed. That caregiving was hard. I said caregiving means caring. Not locking doors. Not changing keys. He had no more questions. I stepped down. Returned to my seat. Agnes testified next. She described the night she saw me on the porch. How I'd stood in the rain. How the light went dark. How she'd almost intervened but hadn't. She said she regretted her silence. That watching harm without speaking makes you part of it. The judge asked if she'd witnessed other incidents. Agnes pulled out her journal. Read dates. Observations. My car moved to the street. Curtains closed during day. Mail collected by others. Small erasures. Documented. The defense attorney tried to dismiss it as neighborly nosiness. Agnes said paying attention wasn't nosiness. It was responsibility. The judge made more notes. Then she called a recess. 30 minutes. Nora and I stood in the hallway. She said it was going well. That Agnes had been strong. That the video had done what words couldn't. I asked what happened next. She said the defense would present. Then closing arguments. Then we'd wait. The 30 minutes felt like 3 hours. When we returned, Ethan took the stand. His attorney asked about my health. My memory. My safety. Ethan said I'd been forgetting things. Repeating myself. That he'd worried I wasn't safe living alone. That the lock change was for my protection. Not exclusion. I felt my jaw tighten. Nora stood for cross-examination. She asked if he'd discussed these concerns with me. Ethan hesitated. Said he'd tried. Nora asked when, where, what exactly he'd said. Ethan couldn't answer. She asked if medical professionals had diagnosed me with memory issues. He said no, but he'd noticed things. She asked if he'd sought medical evaluation, professional guidance, family counseling. He said no to all three. She asked why he'd promised to pick me up from the hospital then didn't. Ethan said he'd forgotten. Nora asked if he forgot or chose not to come. Long silence. Then Ethan said he'd been busy. Nora asked if his mother's post-surgical care was less important than busy. Ethan's attorney objected. Nora withdrew the question. But the damage was done. Kayla didn't testify. Their attorney said she had nothing to add. I thought that was the truest thing said all day. Closing arguments came fast. Defense claimed good intentions, misunderstanding, family complexity. Nora presented facts, timeline, evidence, law. She said neglect doesn't require intent, just impact. That abandonment can be active, deliberate, documented. That the property belonged to me, had always belonged to me. That I had the right to control my own home, my own future. The judge called for final recess. She'd review everything, issue a ruling within the hour. We waited in the hallway again. Agnes bought coffee from the machine. It tasted like water and dust. I drank it anyway. At 11:53, the bailiff called us back. We took our seats. The judge looked at both tables. Then she began to speak. She said she'd seen the evidence, heard the testimony, reviewed the law, that this wasn't a case of misunderstanding. It was a case of control, of erasure, of documented harm, that my testimony was credible, consistent, corroborated, that the video evidence showed intent, malice, mockery, that changing locks without notice constituted exclusion, that Ethan's justifications were unsupported by fact. She ruled in my favor. Full property rights restored, exclusive possession granted, damages awarded, no contact order in place for 90 days. The gavel fell, one sharp crack that echoed through the room. I felt something release in my chest. Not relief, something bigger. Vindication. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. I didn't go back to the house right away. Couldn't. Not yet. The judge had given me possession. But Ethan and Kayla had 10 days to vacate. 10 days to pack their lives out of mine. So I waited, stayed at the motel, drank stale coffee, watched winter deepen. Nora handled the legal details. Eviction notice, property transfer, financial settlement. The court had awarded me damages. $15,000. Ethan's savings. Kayla's comfort fund. I didn't want their money. But I took it anyway. Not for me. For what came next. Ruth called 2 days after the verdict. She'd heard. News travels fast in small towns. She asked if I was still committed to the donation. I told her more than ever. We set a meeting, December 27th, her office, to finalize paperwork, make it legal, make it permanent. Agnes brought me dinner that week. Homemade lasagna. We ate in the motel room. Paper plates, plastic forks. She said the neighborhood was talking. That people had seen the moving truck at the house. That Kayla had left first. 2 days after the verdict. That Ethan was still packing. Moving slow. Moving alone. Agnes said he looked smaller somehow. I said consequences do that. She asked if I felt sorry for him. I thought about it. Really thought. Then I said no. Pity was for accidents. This wasn't an accident. On December 29th, the sheriff called. The house was vacant. Locks changed back. Keys waiting. I could return anytime. I drove over that afternoon. Parked in the driveway. My driveway. The house looked the same. White trim. Blue shutters. But different. Quieter somehow. I walked up the steps. Used the new key. The door opened smooth. Inside smelled like cleaning solution and absence. They'd taken everything of theirs. Furniture. Pictures. Dishes. Left everything of mine. The old couch. Robert's chair. My grandmother's quilt. Things they'd covered with theirs. Hidden. Now visible again. I walked through each room. The kitchen where I'd made thousands of meals. The living room where Ethan learned to walk. The bedroom where Robert and I had grown old together. Every space held ghosts. But they were my ghosts. I opened windows despite the cold. Let fresh air push through. Clear out what remained. Then I sat on the porch steps. Same steps where my key had fallen in the rain. I looked at the yard. The street. The sky going pink with sunset. This house had been my whole world once. Now it would be someone else's. Many someone else's. Women who needed walls that didn't lock them out. I felt good about that. Better than good. Right. I went back inside. Started making lists. What to keep. What to donate. What to repair. The house needed work. Fresh paint. New heating system. Updated kitchen. The damages money would cover most of it. The rest I'd handle myself. I called contractors the next morning. Got estimates. Scheduled work. Planned timeline. They could start mid-January. Be done by March. 3 months to transform a home into a haven. I moved out of the motel on New Year's Eve. Packed my single bag. Thanked the clerk. He asked where I was going. I told him home. My real home. He nodded like he understood. The house felt bigger with just me in it. Colder too. But I built fires in the fireplace. Made soup. Played old records. Filled the silence with things that mattered. Ruth came by on January 3rd. We walked through the property together. She took notes. Measured rooms. Asked questions. How many beds could fit here? Where therapy sessions could happen? Where the office would go? She said the rental next door could house 4 more women. That the Millbrook land could become gardens. Walking paths. Quiet space. She said we could help a dozen women at a time. Maybe more if we added a second floor someday. I told her to dream bigger. I liked it. We signed the papers on January 10th. Legal transfer. Clear deed. Permanent endowment. The house became Winter Key's house officially. My room was the small one at the back, where hydrangeas used to bloom blue every June. I kept Robert's chair, my grandmother's quilt, a single bed. The rest went to shared spaces. Living room, kitchen, dining room, meeting rooms, spaces for women to breathe, to heal, to plan, to remember they were more than what had tried to break them. Contractors arrived on January 15th. The house filled with hammers and paint fumes and radio static. I stayed in my small room. Stayed out of the way. Made coffee for workers. Ordered lunch sometimes. They called me Miss Miriam. Asked about the project. I told them we were building something that lasts. They worked careful, like they understood. By February, the house was transforming. Fresh paint, soft grays and warm whites. New kitchen appliances, industrial-size fridge, 6-burner stove, bathrooms updated, grab bars installed, non-slip floors, bedrooms simple but warm, good mattresses, clean linens, locks that only opened from inside. That last part mattered most. Ruth hired staff, a counselor, a case manager, a night attendant. She interviewed women for the first 6 beds. Survivors of violence, homelessness, systems that failed them, women who needed time, space, keys that worked. The first resident arrived on March 8. Her name was Teresa. She carried 2 bags, wore 3 coats. Ruth walked her through the house, showed her the room, handed her the key. Teresa held it like it might disappear. She asked if it was really hers. Ruth said yes. For 6 months, no one could take it. Teresa cried, then laughed, then cried again. I made her tea, sat with her in the kitchen. Didn't ask questions, just listened when she wanted to talk. She said she hadn't felt safe in 4 years. That safety felt strange now, like a language she'd forgotten. I told her it would come back. That some things you relearn slowly. By mid-March, all 6 beds were filled. Women between 23 and 61. Different stories. Same ending before this. Now beginning again. I cooked most dinners. Big pots of soup. Casseroles. Simple food. We ate together at the long table Ruth had bought. Sometimes quiet. Sometimes talking. Sometimes laughing. The house started to sound like a home. Not mine. Ours. I taught anyone who wanted to learn. How to make pie crust. How to brown meat properly. How to season by taste. How to keep a receipt file. How to write incident reports. How to document. Because evidence matters. Memory isn't enough. We built a shelf in the front room. Called it the Room of Records. Each woman got a binder. For papers. For notes. For proof. Of where they'd been. What they'd survived. What they were building now. The shelf filled up fast. One afternoon in late March, I walked to Agnes's house. She made tea. We sat in her kitchen. She asked how it felt. The house. The women. The new life. I told her it felt like the diner. Like feeding people who needed more than food. Like being useful in a way that mattered. She said Robert would be proud. I said I hoped so. She asked if I missed Ethan. I thought about it. Said I missed who I thought he was. But that person might never have existed. She nodded. Said grief was complicated that way. That you could mourn someone who was still alive. I agreed. We sat in silence. Comfortable silence. The kind that doesn't need filling. Outside, snow was melting. Grass showing through. Spring was coming. Slow, but certain. At Winter Key's house, the women planted seeds in small pots. Tomatoes. Basil. Flowers I didn't recognize. They lined them up on the kitchen windowsill. Waiting for warmth. Waiting for growth. I watched them tend those tiny green shoots. Watched them believe in something that hadn't happened yet. That's what hope looks like. Not faith that everything will be fine. Just belief that growth is possible. That winter ends. That keys fit locks again. That home can be a place you choose. Not a place that chooses you. I stood in the kitchen one evening. 6 women around the table. Talking. Laughing. Planning tomorrow. Pots cooling on the stove. Dishes waiting to be washed. The sound of women who weren't hiding anymore. I thought about the woman who stood in the rain. Who heard her son say she didn't live there anymore. Who dropped her key and walked away. She was still me, but she was also someone new. Someone who learned that doors work both ways. That leaving can be the bravest thing. That building matters more than keeping. I hung 3 photos in my small room. The diner on opening day. Robert under a sky that promised weather. Agnes laughing with her coat unbuttoned in the wind. I left the 4th frame empty. For something that hadn't happened yet. For proof that futures stay unwritten. Until you pick up the pen. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. April brought a journalist. Her name was Sophia Lynn. She'd called 3 times before I answered. Said she was writing about elder abuse. About families who fail. About women who fight back. She wanted to interview me. Feature Winter Keys house. I told her I wasn't interested in being anyone's story. She said I already was. The court case was public record. That local news had picked it up. Social media too. That people were talking, sharing, asking questions. I hadn't known any of that. I'd been too busy building to notice what people said about it. Sophia asked to visit. Just once. Just to see. I told her she could come for lunch. Nothing more. She arrived on a Tuesday. April 9th. Drove a small hybrid. Carried a canvas bag. Wore practical shoes. I liked that. No performance. No theatrics. She shook my hand. Met my eyes. Thanked me for the time. I told her lunch was at noon. She was welcome to stay. The women were cooking. Teresa made chicken soup. Maria made cornbread. Sophia asked if she could help. They said yes. She chopped vegetables. Listened more than talked. I watched her watch them. Careful. Respectful. At lunch, 8 of us sat around the table. We'd added 2 more beds. The rental next door was opening next month. Sophia ate quietly. Didn't pull out a recorder. Didn't take notes. Just listened when women talked. Laughed when they laughed. After lunch, she asked if we could speak privately. We sat on the back porch. The hydrangeas were starting to bud. She asked how this started. I told her. The short version. Hospital. Locks. Rain. Key on the step. Court. Transformation. She asked how it felt to lose my son. I said I lost him long before the locks changed. That he'd chosen comfort over conscience. Wife over mother. Easy over right. That the locks just made it official. She asked if I'd forgiven him. I said forgiveness required an apology. I hadn't received one. That I'd moved past anger. But past wasn't the same as forgiven. She asked what I wanted people to know. I thought about it. Long silence. Then I told her this. That being old doesn't mean being disposable. That families aren't sacred when they cause harm. That documentation matters. Evidence saves lives. That women know how to rebuild. We've always known. Sophia nodded. Wrote nothing down. Just listened. She asked if I'd be willing to share my story publicly. I asked why it mattered. She said because other women were standing in the rain right now. Holding keys that didn't work. Wondering if they were wrong to be hurt. That seeing someone else survive helps people believe they can too. I told her she could write it. But no photos of my face. That the women here deserved privacy. So did I. She agreed. The article came out 3 weeks later. April 30th. Online first. Then in the weekend paper. It was titled The Woman Who Changed the Locks Back. Agnes brought me a copy. We read it together in her kitchen. Sophia had written it carefully. Factually. No sentimentality. No drama. Just truth. She'd included the court documents. The timeline. The transformation. She'd quoted me exactly. Nothing added. Nothing softened. At the end, she'd written about Winter Keys house. About the women living there now. Their gardens. Their recovery. Their plans. She'd included a donation link for the trust. I hadn't known she'd do that. By Monday morning, the link had raised $32,000. By Wednesday, $60,000. By Friday, Ruth called. Said we'd raised enough to open the Millbrook property. That we could house 20 women now. Maybe 25. I sat with that number. 25 lives. 25 chances. I thought about the woman I'd been in November. Locked out. Erased. Invisible. I couldn't have imagined this. But here it was. Real. Growing. The article did something else too. It went viral. That's what Sophia called it. Shared thousands of times. Comments in the hundreds. People telling their own stories. Their own locked doors. Their own rain. Some angry. Some grateful. Some still standing on porches waiting. I didn't read most of it. Too much. Too loud. But Ruth showed me some. Women asking how to document abuse. How to find lawyers. How to leave safely. Other women answering. Sharing resources. Offering help. It became a thread of survival. A map drawn by people who'd walked the path. Sophia wrote a follow-up piece. May 15th. About the response. About the community forming online. About how one woman's story became a chorus. She interviewed 3 women from Winter Key's house. They agreed. Wanted to speak. Wanted to be counted. Teresa talked about the key. How it was the first thing she'd controlled in years. Maria talked about the kitchen. How cooking together felt like family. The right kind. Lynn talked about the records shelf. How writing things down made them real. Made them matter. Their voices were strong, clear, unashamed. I was proud of them. Not proud like a mother. Proud like a witness. The internet did what the internet does. Kayla's social media got found. Dug up. Examined. The Halloween video surfaced. The one from court. People shared it. Dissected it. Condemned it. Kayla's follower count dropped. Her sponsorships ended. Her comments filled with anger. She locked her accounts. Disappeared from public view. I didn't share the video. Didn't add to the pile. Exposure was enough. I didn't need revenge. Ethan's name appeared in threads too. People found his business page. Left reviews. Asked questions. About elder abuse. About locked doors. About standing by. His ratings dropped. His phone number changed. I heard through Agnes that he'd left town. Moved somewhere south. Started over. I felt nothing about that. Not satisfaction. Not sadness. Just nothing. He'd made his choices. Now he lived with them. In June, a local news station asked to visit Winter Key's house. Ruth consulted the women. They voted yes. The crew came on a Tuesday. June 11th. They filmed the garden, the kitchen, the common room. Interviewed Ruth. Interviewed 3 women who agreed to appear. I stayed off camera. That was the deal. The segment aired June 14th. 3 minutes on the evening news. It showed the house, the women, the work. It mentioned my name once. Miriam Hale, founder. That was enough. The donations doubled that week. Ruth hired 2 more staff. A job counselor, an addiction specialist. We added beds, expanded services, built a computer lab. The Millbrook property opened in July. 8 beds, a therapy cottage, walking trails through the woods. Women who needed quiet could go there. Heal there. Think there. By August, we had a waiting list again. 43 women. Different states. Different stories. Same need. We couldn't house them all. But we could help connect them. Ruth built a network. Other shelters. Other resources. Other safe places. Winter Key's house became a hub. A model. A beginning. One afternoon in late August, I sat on the back porch. The hydrangeas were in full bloom. Deep blue. Heavy with blossoms. I heard laughter from the kitchen. Pots clanging. Water running. Someone practicing guitar in the living room. Tentative chords. Getting stronger. This house had held so much silence once. Now it was full of sound. Good sound. Living sound. I thought about Robert. About his amendment. His foresight. He'd protected me from something he couldn't name. Given me tools I didn't know I'd need. I wished I could tell him it worked. That his careful planning saved more than just me. That it built something that would outlast us both. Agnes came by that evening. Brought zucchini from her garden. We sat on the porch together. Watched the sun drop behind the trees. She asked if I was happy. I thought about the word. Happy. I said I was useful. And that was better than happy. That happiness comes and goes. But usefulness lasts. She smiled. Said that was the most Miriam answer I could give. We sat in comfortable quiet. The kind that only comes from years of knowing someone. From trust built slow and kept careful. Inside, the house hummed with evening routines. Dishes being washed. Doors closing softly. Voices saying good night. The rhythm of a home that works. I thought about the key on the wet step. The one I'd dropped and left behind. I never went back for it. Didn't need to. I had new keys now. Keys that opened doors for others. Keys that mattered more than the one I'd lost. Sophia called in September. Asked if I'd speak at a conference. About elder rights. About documentation. About building from loss. I said no. I wasn't a speaker. She said I didn't have to be. Just had to tell the truth. I thought about it. About the women still standing in rain. Still holding keys that don't work. Still wondering if they're wrong to want more. I said yes. Not for me. For them. Because survival isn't just about saving yourself. It's about lighting the path so others can follow. The conference was in October. I prepared. I practiced. But that's another chapter. This one ends here. With hydrangeas blooming blue. With women's voices filling spaces that used to echo. With keys that work. And doors that only lock from the inside. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. October came with cold mornings and shorter light. The conference was on the 16th. 2 weeks away. I practiced my speech in the bathroom mirror. Felt ridiculous. Stopped. Started again. I'd never been good at talking about myself. The diner had taught me to listen. To serve. To stay background. Now Sophia wanted me front and center. Wanted me to tell 200 people about locked doors and wet steps. About sons who choose silence. About keys that stop working. I almost called her. Almost said no. But I thought about the waiting list. 43 women. 43 stories. If speaking helped even one, it was worth feeling ridiculous. The conference was in Portland. 2 hours north. Sophia offered to drive me. I said I'd drive myself. Needed the control. Needed the option to leave if it got too much. I left Gray Harbor at 7 on October 16th. The morning was clear, cold. Trees halfway between green and gold. I drove with the radio off. Practiced sentences in my head. My name is Miriam Hale. I'm 67. I used to own a diner. Simple. Factual. A place to start. The conference center was downtown. Modern. Glass and steel. I parked in the deck. Sat in the car for 5 minutes. Reminded myself why I was here. For the women standing in rain. For the ones holding keys that don't work. For the ones who think they're crazy for being hurt. I got out. Walked inside. Sophia met me in the lobby. She wore a blazer. Professional. Calm. She said I looked ready. I told her I looked terrified. She laughed. Said they were often the same thing. The panel was at 10. I had an hour. Sophia walked me to the green room. got me coffee, stayed close. 2 other speakers were there. Both younger, both composed. One had started a legal advocacy group. One ran a national hotline. They shook my hand, said they'd read about Winter Key's house, said what I'd built mattered. I nodded, didn't know what else to say. At 9:55 we walked to the conference room. It was bigger than I'd expected. Rows of chairs, all filled. 200 people, maybe more. My chest tightened. Sophia squeezed my hand. She whispered that I just had to tell the truth. That truth didn't need performance. I took my seat on stage. The lights were bright, warm. The moderator introduced us, talked about elder rights, about systemic failures, about courage. Then she turned to me, asked me to share my story. I looked at the audience. Faces watching, waiting. I started with my name. Miriam Hale, 67, former diner owner, widow, mother. Then I told them about November, about the hospital, the promised ride, the phone calls that went unanswered, about renting a car, driving myself home, about the key that wouldn't turn in my own front door, about my son's voice through the wood, about the rain, the cold, the key falling, the truth settling in. My voice stayed steady. I didn't cry, just told what happened, one sentence after another. The room was silent, not polite silence, real silence, the kind that holds breath. I told them about Robert's amendment, his foresight, his protection, about Nora, about Agnes, about documentation, about court, about the video, about winning property I no longer wanted to keep, about transformation, about Winter Key's house, about the women living there now, about usefulness being better than happiness, about keys that work, about doors that lock from inside, about rebuilding. When I finished, the silence held for 3 long seconds. Then applause. Not polite, real. People standing, hands together, eyes wet. I didn't know what to do with that. So I just sat, nodded, waited for it to stop. The moderator asked questions. How did I find the courage to fight back? I said courage was just exhaustion with better timing. That I was too tired to keep disappearing. Someone asked if I'd reconciled with my son. I said no. That reconciliation requires accountability. I hadn't received it. That I'd moved forward. But forward didn't mean back. Someone asked what advice I'd give to others. I thought about it. Then I said this. Document everything. Keep receipts. Take photos. Write dates down. Memory isn't enough in court. Evidence is. Find one person who sees you, who believes you, who'll testify. You can't do this alone. Don't try. Know your rights. Laws protect elders. Learn them, use them, and understand that family isn't sacred when it causes harm. That walking away isn't failure. Sometimes it's survival. The applause came again. After the panel, people lined up. Wanted to talk, to thank me, to share their own stories. A woman in her 70s, locked out by her daughter last year. A man in his 60s, pushed out by his son's wife. A younger woman, watching it happen to her mother. Not sure how to help. I listened to each one. Gave them Ruth's contact information. Told them they weren't alone. That what happened to them had names. Laws. Remedies. That silence protected abusers. Speaking protected victims. By noon I was exhausted. Sophia drove me to lunch. A quiet cafe. No crowds. She asked how it felt. I said it felt like opening a vein. But a necessary one. That some bleeding helps healing. She said she'd gotten 50 emails already. People wanting to help. to donate, to volunteer. That Winter Keys house was becoming a model. Other states were asking questions. I told her to send them to Ruth. I wasn't an administrator. I was just someone who'd stood in the rain and decided to build something fireproof after. Sophia smiled, said that was exactly why people listened. I drove home that afternoon. The trees were more gold now. Less green. I thought about the woman I'd been a year ago. Locked out. Standing in rain. Key on the step. She wouldn't recognize me now. Or maybe she would. Maybe she'd see what she was becoming. The version that survived. That fought. That built. When I got back to Gray Harbor, I stopped at Agnes's house. She had soup on. Split pea. Smelled like comfort. She asked how it went. I told her I'd spoken to 200 people. That I hadn't cried. That I'd survived it. She said she wasn't surprised. That I'd survived worse. That speaking was just another kind of standing. We ate soup. Talked about nothing. About everything. About her grandson's new job. About my tomatoes before the frost. About the election. About winter coming. Normal things. Good things. The kind of conversation that doesn't need to mean anything to matter. At Winter Key's house, the women were making dinner. Spaghetti. Garlic bread. Salad from the last of the garden. I walked into chaos. Good chaos. Teresa stirring sauce. Maria setting the table. Lynn chopping vegetables. New women I didn't know yet. Learning. Helping. Belonging. They asked how the conference went. I told them I'd talked. That people had listened. That more help was coming. Teresa hugged me. Said I was brave. I told her we all were. That bravery was just showing up when leaving would be easier. That night I sat in my small room. The one at the back. Where hydrangeas bloomed blue in summer. I opened my notebook. The one I'd started in the motel. Read through the pages. The lists. The plans. The progression. From locked out to legal victory to this. A house full of women. A network of support. A model being replicated. I'd started this wanting my home back. I'd ended up building something bigger than home. Something that mattered more than my name on a deed. I turned to a blank page. Wrote the date. November 1st. 1 year since the locks changed. 1 year since the key fell. 1 year since I stood in the rain and learned what cold teaches. I wrote what I'd learned. That erasure can be fought. That evidence matters. That documentation saves lives. That family isn't sacred when it harms. That blood doesn't excuse cruelty. That walking away is sometimes the bravest thing. That rebuilding is possible. That keys can work again. That doors can open. That usefulness is better than happiness. That purpose outlasts comfort. That you don't have to be young to start over. That winter ends. That spring comes. That seeds grow. I underlined the last line twice. Then I closed the notebook. Outside, the wind picked up. Leaves scraping pavement. November arriving. But inside, the house was warm. Voices downstairs. Laughter. Dishes clanking. Water running. The sound of women who weren't hiding. Who weren't erased. Who had keys that worked and doors they controlled. I thought about Ethan. Wondered where he was. How he was. Then I stopped wondering. He'd made his choices. I'd made mine. His led to somewhere south. To starting over in shame. Mine led here. To this room. This house. These women. I didn't need forgiveness from him. I needed distance. Clarity. Purpose. I had all three. A voicemail came that week. Ethan's number. I almost deleted it without listening. But curiosity won. His voice sounded smaller. Uncertain. He said he missed something he couldn't name. Said he'd been thinking. That maybe he'd been wrong. He didn't say sorry. Didn't ask to come back. Didn't take responsibility. Just said he missed something. I deleted it. Not with anger. With clarity. Missing something isn't the same as understanding what you did. Regret isn't apology. Discomfort isn't accountability. I'd learned that language. The language of empty words. I wouldn't accept it anymore. That Sunday, Agnes and I walked to the cemetery. Visited Robert's grave. Brought late-season mums. Cleared leaves from the stone. I told him about the house. About the women. About speaking. About fighting back with the tools he'd given me. About building something that would last past both of us. Agnes stood beside me, quiet. Then she said Robert knew I'd be okay. That his amendment wasn't about doubting me. It was about equipping me. I thought about that. About the difference. She was right. We walked back through the gold trees. November light slanting. Cold but not bitter. The kind of cold that promises something. Not spring yet. But eventual spring. Winter first. Always winter first. But I knew how to survive winter now. I had keys. I had doors. I had purpose. I had women learning to survive their own winters beside me. And I had the knowledge that locked doors can be opened. Not always by the people who closed them. Sometimes by you. With the right key. The right help. The right refusal to disappear. I walked into Winter Key's house as the sun set. The porch light glowed. Warm. Welcoming. My light now. Ours. I opened the door. It swung wide. And I walked through.